Good morning. How's everybody on this Tuesday? Hopefully you're staying dry in the elements. Welcome into 104.5 The Zone. Bud, what are we going to talk about today? You got anything?
What'd you have for breakfast?
I had a BLT. It was delightful. A little bit of sriracha on it as well to go with the mayo. I'm not just a plain mayo guy. I can't operate that way. What'd you have for breakfast?
Yogurt and one egg.
That's an odd breakfast.
It is an odd breakfast. Oh, the Titans hired a head coach.
Hey, look at that.
Reportedly.
Congratulations. Do we have any kind of fanfare? Any kind of... No, not the Dan Laser show. You're going to cause Rex when you do all four of them like that. You
10-2, everybody.
You have to stop. You have to stop. Be safe out there. Yes, the Titans have a new head coach. The announcement expected later on. The press conference not expected today, perhaps tomorrow, perhaps Thursday, pending logistics. Congratulations to you and all of your friends and loved ones who are celebrating today the hire of Brian Callahan, the former Bengals offensive coordinator, who we declared ourselves in favor of by consensus yesterday, just in time. 615-737-1045 is the number if you want to jump in. We'd be happy to have you. Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch. You can live stream the show there as well, where Tyler Dial says on YouTube, my speakers just literally exploded. Congratulations, Lucas. He'll send you the bill.
That's the heat we're throwing today on this show.
Some heat. So this is their guy from the jump. Like, they conduct the search. There's 4 in-person interview candidates. Lucas, didn't you express concerns to me yesterday about Dan Quinn not scheduled until Wednesday of this week? And I said, it's possible that they hire somebody before Dan Quinn ends up coming to town. But, at least they can book a flight and schedule a meeting.
First team to hire their coach that was not an internal candidate.
So, Amy Adams Strunk, true to her word, we didn't want to mess with the trade stuff because it would put us as much as 3 weeks behind. We don't want to get caught at the back of the line. We want our guy. They got their guy. Brian Callahan becomes the 20th head coach in the franchise's history. That's Titans and Oilers. And replaces Mike Vrabel, who, you think Amy's got a smile on her face knowing that she hired a coach before Mike got a job? Just a little bit of petty somewhere in there. Who's to say? But yeah, this is what they needed to do. This checks all the boxes. They need somebody to maximize the position of quarterback. They need somebody to innovate on offense. They need somebody to, perhaps just be a Nepo baby for one of the greatest offensive line coaches in football. We'll take that. Come on down, Bill Callahan. Fair to expect that those kind of moves would be next, unless, as we'll talk about, Jimmy Haslam blocks them, which would objectively be hilarious.
But we don't know the state of Bill Callahan's contract with the Cleveland Browns.
We can dive into that later on. But Brian Callahan checks the most amount of boxes that this team needs. Now, it's just a start, right? Because the thing that's broken about this team is not necessarily the coaching situation. The dynamic between the owner and the previous head coach, bit of a broken situation. Coaching staff, okay, whatever. Go get players. Figure out exactly what you want, what they look like, how many of them you can get, either via draft and free agency. Senior Bowl starts on Sunday, kids. And we're full speed ahead into this thing because the thing that's most broken about this team is the roster. And the coaching staff, whomever they end up bringing in under Brian Callahan, they got their work cut out for them, for sure. Especially whoever they hire as an offensive line coach. Good luck and God bless. But we'll get to that later on. Today is a day for, I think, a lot of Titans fans to be excited about. This is something that I think, based on a lot of feedback that I got talking to people. We played audio clips from guys like Teron Davenport, who were big Callahan proponents when we did the 615 Sessions podcast. People that reached out from around the league saying how much, Lucas, we're going to love Callahan. He's not going to, take rib shots at us like Vrabel would in press conferences, but apparently his answers are great. So we love that. We'll take substance, if not entertainment value. And kind of looking at everything that needs to come after this now. There's so many different facets of the football team that immediately benefit. And for Rand Carthon and his 2 assistant general managers and Amy Adams Strunk, basically, this is kind of like if you had to create a candidate in a lab for, I don't want to use the C word. Don't make me use it.
Cahoots?
I thought you didn't like cahoots.
No, we settled on that. Basically is what NFL coaching staffs do each and every week. They
Plot and
secretly
scheme.
meet and plot in order to best their opponent. They are in cahoots. Brian Callahan has been
I
in
won't say
cahoots
the other word. I won't do it.
with Zach Taylor each and every week leading up to a game day and on game day in the process of calling plays on offense.
Alex Blaine Mans on Facebook Live says, Buck, you seem really excited about this hire. I just want somebody to score points. I don't care how you do it. I don't care who you are. I don't care how you sound. I don't care what you say to me at a press conference. Please, God, score points. And that's what they're trying to do. This falls in line with the trend of the league.
Is that verbatim what Amy Adams-Strunk said to Brian Callahan in their first meeting? Those words.
Shut up and show me touchdown plays, coach man. Shut up and show me the touchdown plays. I'm tired of it. 16.5 points per game, 17 points per game. Send it into the sun. We're done with it. Ugh. Who's to say? You got to fix the offensive line first and foremost before you can talk about any of this crap, which, again, players matter more here. But this is the first thing in the order of the NFL calendar, and the Titans are the first team to hire somebody who was not an in-house candidate. So we'll keep you updated with the latest on announcements, on press conferences. I would expect that we would have Brian Callahan on the show at some point in the near future. Again, none of this confirmed by the team. Officially, there is no Jim Wyatt tweet with an article and a very dignified and professional graphic to come along with it. Do they do jersey swaps or logo swaps with coaches the same way that they do with players in free agency, or is that not a thing? Well, you're no good with Photoshop? You're going to turn your mic on?
What do you mean? Oh, like photoshopping a Titans polo or something on Brian Callahan?
That is generally what I mean,
I think
yes.
the technology exists to do that.
Okay. It's beyond our scope around here. Brian Callahan speaking about his offensive philosophy. Lucas, where is this audio courtesy from?
So this is from a media appearance by Callahan before training camp. So summer of 2023, meeting with Cincinnati media and Titans fans. This is your next head coach on his philosophy on offense in the NFL and how the game is evolving.
Spicy.
You're just seeing a shift in philosophy. You know, the teams that win the most games are generally the teams that pass the ball the best. That's usually because they have really good quarterbacks, and usually because they have guys that can make plays on football outside. And so you're seeing the teams invest in that part of the game really across the board. And, you know, we're no different. We spent really 2 top 35 picks on receivers and on a quarterback. And so we've invested in it as well. But I do think that that's the shift in the league these days, is that the passing game has become the focal point. However, that does leave you opportunities to be really effective and efficient running the football because defenses do the same thing. They still give the resources to the pass game, which then gives you opportunities, hopefully, in the run game, to run against light boxes and numbers advantage and all that stuff. So I think the running back is still an important part of an NFL offense. It just has changed in the way that people view it and look at it, but it's still have to be able to do those things to play good football.
He's just whispering sweet nothings into your ear.
You're telling me that you shouldn't run the football against 9-man boxes? I don't know if he's going to be a good fit here.
Well, listen, it's totally counter to anything that we've experienced before. And listen, nobody's a loser in the offseason, right? So there's nothing for you to be upset about yet, right? This is not all going to go perfect and according to plan. I'm sure there will be some bumps and bruises along the way, but there will be time for that. The point is, philosophically, this is what you want. This is what Will Levis needs. Doesn't mean that he's your quarterback for the next 10 years, but Brian Callahan thinks it's good enough to make it work right now. He doesn't have to be Joe Burrow. He doesn't have to be Matt Stafford, or, I mean, would be nice if he was a little more than Derek Carr. I would like a little better than Derek Carr from Will Levis. Super veiny Derek Carr, perhaps. Who's to say? We'll talk about it. Phrasing. Anyway, 615-737-1045 is the number. We will talk about how Brian Callahan landed the job, the story of it, a really well-reported article in The Athletic by their Bengals reporter, Paul Denner. We'll talk about it coming up next. Welcome back to the show. 615-737-1045 is the number. If you want to jump in, your thoughts on Brian Callahan as the next Titans head coach. How we feeling? So, Lucas, you haven't read, there's a couple of good articles on him, Brian Callahan, in particular, The Athletic. This guy is pretty available, it seems, to talk to media about a lot of different things that he's involved in. He seems pretty comfortable. All of it basically seems on the record, and I know necessarily that doesn't mean anything for the audience, but like that much from a coach who's just that comfortable letting you know everything that he's doing. And okay, yeah, I mean, it's not state secrets. It's not anything that's changed dramatically. We don't have to do the whole Patriots way thing, and we'll cross the injury bridge when we get there. Perhaps that was a sticking point with the last guy. But in The Athletic, there is a good piece that I assume Paul Denner of The Athletic, their Bengals writer, worked overnight on about how it was that Brian Callahan almost missed his opportunity to be the Titans head coach because of the same thing that everybody else was dealing with last week. Lucas, can you tell me what everybody else was dealing with last week?
Ice, snow, travel conditions, etc.
The weather. The weather made it difficult to get a flight on time to try and make these interviews for a guy that spent his entire career building up to the point to interview for head coaching jobs. Had 3 head coaching interviews in 3 days that were up ahead, and then the ice and snow and everything else that we've been dealing with in our part of the country, and including Cincinnati and the Louisville area and Cincinnati Northern Kentucky International Airport, which is a weird phrase to say. Dealing with the weather, they had to make some adjustments, and he's dealing with what all of us deal with on a regular basis. Canceled flights. So the Titans send the plane to try and make sure that they can get their interview in with Brian Callahan.
Well, he was prepared to drive, right?
Yes.
According to the report.
Yes. Prepared to drive, prepared to make. I mean, listen, at that point, like, think about that, okay? What's your dream job? Not to jeopardize your employment situation with our current employer.
I'm living it. Is it that unbelievable to you?
You're an idiot. What do you actually want to do with your life?
Host Jeopardy.
No.
So
really?
if I had the opportunity to be the host of Jeopardy, then yeah, I would drive 4 hours through sleet, ice, and snow just to get that second interview, the way Callahan seemingly was willing to with the Titans.
I didn't have you pegged for a Jeopardy host. I guess that makes sense. I don't know. I'm having trouble picturing you in a game show atmosphere. That would be funny. I know what your level of patience is for my dumb questions. I can't imagine how you deal with candidates back there. He's back there fielding calls and ignoring me. He's not listening to a word that I'm saying. Either way. So Brian Callahan has his opportunity to get his dream gig, and the snow says, nah, figure it out. So he's prepared to drive. The Titans send the team plane. Again, all this on theathletic.com. And they wanted to make sure that they get these interviews in with him specifically so that he doesn't have the opportunity to leave their building to go interview in Carolina. Today, he was scheduled, and with the Falcons on Wednesday. He was the target, had been for a while. Welcome to Tennessee, Brian Callahan. So there's a graph in here about would the Titans brass send the plane for any stranded candidate? Maybe. That they sent one for Callahan, one of just 3 candidates to receive a second interview after their first wave of sessions on video calls landed a pretty clear message of interest. Does it matter at all if she made up her mind like after a Zoom call or had talking about Amy, preconceived notions of who this person was, why they wanted him, why he was as much of a top candidate for their job as anybody else that had been considered? He seemed to be kind of in the front running the whole way through. He's the first person to interview on Zoom. He's the first person to get a follow-up interview. And they're out there flying him to Nashville and then keeping him here to make sure that he can't go to Carolina and get a drink thrown on him by Tepper.
Do you remember the date that Mike Vrabel was officially fired?
Oh, was it like the 9th?
It was a Tuesday.
I know it was a Tuesday because I thought he was getting fired Sunday, and then he didn't. And then I thought he was getting fired Monday, and then he didn't. And then he got fired Tuesday at like 11.
It was the Tuesday after the Jags game, so 2 weeks ago to the date, on January 9th, Mike Vrabel was fired. On
Happy
January,
anniversary.
Yes. On January, by the way, the Titans beat the Jaguars 16 days ago.
Shut up. That's not true.
Let that
That's
sink
not
in.
true. I'm so tired.
In an alternate universe, that was. On January 10th was the initial report from Justin Mello that the Titans have contacted Brian Callahan. So a 24-hour cycle of reaching out to him, at least as it was reported. You wonder how much groundwork was done pre-Vrabel firing.
Why do you think I asked Rand when they thought that they might fire Mike? How long have you been doing research before firing your coach, sir? Because it's my understanding that you've been vetting some candidates for quite some time. And maybe you have to do that every year. Truly, you probably do to an extent. No matter how secure you are in your situation, like you have to have a general idea of who's going to be out there, what the market looks like. Are these candidates people that would be beneficial to you given your current situation? You take a couple of days, you figure it out. Maybe instead of firing a coach on a Sunday or Black Monday, you wait till Tuesday, and you still make sure that you're at the front of the line. So there's no way to tell whether like her having her sights and organizationally, because I'm sure she got feedback from Rand Carthon, who is familiar with a variety of different people and specifically the system that they run in Cincinnati, the kind of Shanahan-McVay stuff that everybody wants, and apparently only Mike McDonald has the kryptonite to, which I'm sure will come up in a later head coaching news break. If she had her sights locked on this person the entire way through and it ends up being the right decision, then, no harm, no foul. I'm just curious because of the comments. I want to know how much her words in that hostage video matter, right, with Mike Keith, where she's saying, well, it doesn't have to be somebody with an offensive background. Okay, I'll take you at your word. There's 11 different people that you've requested to interview. And again, I'm not saying that this is the wrong decision, the right decision. I have no idea beyond, based on what this team needs, this guy's resume satisfies a lot of it. So, point Amy.
Well, decision makers, athletic directors, owners, general managers give you that rhetoric all the time when they make a new hiring, right, at head coach. He was our number one target all along.
I've never talked to a general manager that hasn't said that their first-round pick was the person that they wanted the entire time.
The whole way.
You're
right?
lying to me.
Greg Byrne did it at Alabama. Kalen DeBoer was the top target all along. Well, sure, but that's because, Sark wasn't available and Kirby couldn't come do it.
Because they put out recruiting-style hype videos about them staying with their current employers.
But with that said, reading between the lines, the breadcrumb trail, so to speak, points to Brian Callahan being their number one guy all along when they initiated this search.
It wasn't really breadcrumbs though, Lucas. It felt like just whole slices of toast just left, piece after piece after piece, not crumbs, whole pieces of bread.
Maybe outside of Ben Johnson. I think a lot of Titans fans are processing this today as best case scenario because Ben Johnson was not in the picture. Right? Ben Johnson,
not here, no.
He didn't want to interview here. It's the only place that he was contacted by that he did not interview. So with him out of the picture, I think a lot of Titans fans feel like they settled on best case scenario.
615-737-1045 is the number if you would like to join the discussion. What is your reaction to the news that Brian Callahan is going to be your next head coach? Start with Jeff in Nashville.
Hey, Buck. Good afternoon. How are you?
Doing well.
Good. Hey, I'll give Brian Callahan a chance simply based on the fact that his name's not Mike.
Hey, listen, this breaks a trend. This is a thing. Mike Malarkey, Mike Vrabel, Mike Munchak. How many other Mikes?
It's been over a decade since the Titans head coach. Ken Wisenhunt was wedged in there. So we had a brief 2 or so year respite of no Mikes coaching the Titans.
Every part of my being wants to say that this is the most heralded offensive coach head coaching hire in Tennessee since Ken Wisenhunt, but that feels egregious. That feels unnecessary for me to do to Titans fans. I'm sorry. I take it back. I don't know why. I don't know why I go there. It's just a natural reaction for me. Chuck in Clarksville's next.
Hey, Buck. Callahan was my top choice all along, and the reason being, I think he's been being groomed since Denver to be a head coach. I think his work there, and then moving up the line, with the Raiders, with the Lions, with the Bengals. I think he's been groomed to be a head coach for a while. So I think he was the most ready, other than the ones that were already head coaches. But I think he's got the mentality. I think he's kind of like the Kyle Shanahan to his dad ratio of learning from what he did right and what he did wrong. So I really am excited that Brian Callahan's a coach.
Thank you for the call, Chuck. So they're, however many grains of salt you want to take, like the internal vibe about it right now, they're hype about it. Like this is who they felt like they wanted, whether that's tongue in cheek or they actually mean it. Like this is the person that they felt like made the most sense for them throughout the course of the entire process. And, he'll have plenty of decisions that are scrutinized, the staff that they have to fill out, the offensive coordinator here, the quarterback's coach here, like the offensive line coach. Is it going to be Dad? Is it going to be somebody else? Mike Munchak's just down the road. Maybe call him. But to the idea of what Chuck in Clarksville is saying, what did we talk about with Bobby Slowick yesterday? Maybe a little soon.
Can he lead a room? Can he communicate a message consistently?
Those you make those things sound much more concerning than I think the terms that we put him in yesterday.
Well, and more than a 1-year sample size of it. More than a one quarterback in 1-year sample size of it, which is what we have with Slowick.
More than the best rookie quarterback statistically that we've seen in modern football.
Sure. Still just one season.
And the idea of maybe you Ben Johnson it, where Ben Johnson was doing head coaching interviews after his first full season as the OC in Detroit, whether he didn't get a job or he decided it was better for him to come back, work to his benefit. They put together another great season in Detroit. They're out there in the NFC Championship game. He's the top candidate, was requested by, 6 of the 7 open jobs, including the Patriots. Excuse me, not including the Patriots because the Patriots had an in-house candidate. And interviewed with all 5 of the other teams. He did not interview with the Titans just based on how the schedule worked out and the prioritizations there. But for Bobby Slowick, perhaps that makes more sense. Maybe you go back, whether you get the benefit of interviewing in this cycle, you get the experience of what these owner-coach interviewee interactions are going to be like, what you have to present, how your staff needs to look like, all the different things that you don't know if you're going into these interviews for the first time. You go back, you put together another nice year in Houston. C.J. Stroud's not going anywhere. Neither is Laramie Tunsil. You feel pretty good about what you got, the bones there, and you can build upon that and turn yourself into a better candidate while improving some of these leadership skills that you talked about, that we mentioned. To the caller's point, Callahan has been around this stuff his entire life, including Dad being a former head coach, a failed head coach with the Raiders, but still having the experience of what it is to kind of work through those things. And if you find a way to get him off the Browns staff, meaning Bill, Brian's dad, to come to the Titans and coach the offensive line, maybe you make him an assistant head coach and helps guide you through the process.
And they got to a Super Bowl.
Who?
Bill Callahan's Raiders.
Yeah, but I mean that did not go well.
Sure. But they got to a Super Bowl.
Okay. So did Brian Callahan. So we'll talk about his quarterback resume as well. I want you to hear from him on. When do you want to play this Angry Brian clip? Because this one I'm interested in. I don't know if it makes the most sense here or later in the show.
Well, we're talking about it in the next segment. The Titans have hired the complete opposite of Mike Vrabel. And I found interesting. We can play it now if you want.
I'm sorry. I was talking into the wrong. I hit the talkback thing. Broadcast professionals around here. No, we can wait. We can wait. I was just curious when you wanted to play it because we have more calls to take. We have time here.
The Titans did go that route, though, right? In the complete opposite direction. Brian Callahan is almost everything Mike Vrabel wasn't. In the way he operates, just his demeanor with the media, seemingly with players, his background on offense around the quarterback position. Wasn't the former player Mike Vrabel was. He's a walk-on quarterback at UCLA and earned a scholarship eventually, right? I think his senior year he got a scholarship and was basically a holder at UCLA, so didn't have that type of background. It's really hard. The Venn diagram of Mike Vrabel and Brian Callahan seems to be two completely separate circles.
Yeah, because she got pissed and fired Mike Vrabel, so she doesn't want another Mike Vrabel. That was the whole thing. No Bill Belichick, no Jim Harbaugh, no coach, no previous head coach with proven track record and once, some degree, if not a large degree of control over their situation. First-time head coach, more amenable in a variety of different ways. Literally the definition of collaboration. Oh, I said it. I feel like I need to wash my mouth out with soap.
Can you give me the most encouraging thing about Brian Callahan and the most discouraging thing about Brian Callahan. We can revisit the way we vetted these candidates, where biggest reason for, biggest reason against. Now that we know who the Titans head coach is, where do you settle on that?
The biggest reason for is the quarterback resume.
The most diverse quarterback resume of any of these candidates, and it's not close.
Because it's not just about Will Levis. How does this impact Malik Willis? I'm fascinated to know. Not that that's a large portion of the conversation here, and it's entirely possible that they bring in a veteran backup and Malik's not on the roster by the time we get through training camp and all these different things. But there's layers to this stuff, right? How does this impact something? How does this impact Malik Willis as much as it does Will Levis? Will Levis as the immediate future. He's no longer the future. He's the present. So now you capitalize on this, and you've got somebody with a proven track record of playing to the quarterback's strengths, no matter who the quarterbacks are, which is a big part of this. Because it's not just Joe Burrow. It's Jake Browning. It's not just Matt Stafford. It's guys that have had to play behind Stafford in Detroit. There's a variety of you want to know that you're going to have some kind of safety net if inevitably, as every starting quarterback in the league this year, I'm pretty sure did, missed time and had to have their backup quarterback come in an expanded 17-game, I got to say expanded, it's 17-game regular season now. That's what it is. But as the season gets longer, the backup quarterback becomes more important because at some point they're going to have to play. You want a coach who's going to put you in position to not have a huge drop-off from that.
How much is the Jake Browning stuff, where does that sort of rank as far as positive notes on Callahan's resume? Because you look at the run with Manning and the role that he had. He wasn't the QB coach, but instrumental. I mean, Peyton's talked about how important Brian Callahan was to him in his time in Denver. Matt Stafford, the highest QBR of Stafford's career over the course of a 16-game season, came under Brian Callahan in 2016 and 2017. He had a QBR of 65.2. He's never had a QBR that high in a season where he's played all 16/17 games. So he's got that resume, he's got that profile, Derek Carr, when he was in Oakland, but how much does the Browning stuff rank in that pecking order with what they were able to accomplish and not have to completely revolutionize the game plan, but still be able to tweak it in a way that the Bengals were not eliminated from the playoff picture because their quarterback went down like a lot of other teams were? Well,
I don't want to take away credit from Jake Browning because the player ultimately has to go out there and execute. So there's some degree of that I think, he needs to be cited for as well. But they went 4-3 with a backup quarterback. After a terrible start, they lost to a team like the Titans. That's a huge bullet that the Titans dodged. They had no business beating the actual Joe Burrow-led Bengals by the time he got healthy, dealing with that calf injury. And this game that the Titans hosted the Bengals in early in the season was the last time that Joe Burrow, prior to having the wrist injury that ruled him out for the rest of the year, it was the last time that Joe Burrow didn't look right. Like the Titans were the beneficiaries of that. That they finished 9-8 in a division where all three of the other teams made the postseason, Browns, Steelers, Ravens, as the number one overall seed in the AFC. They were still competitive. They were still fighting for it at the end. They were still scoring points. You know what I would do for 21.5 points a game? You know what kind of terrible illegal things I would do that are not safe for FCC radio? For 21 points. 21.5? More than 3 touchdowns, Lucas. Stop.
They had their best offensive stretch of the season last season with Browning at quarterback. 34, 34, and 27 points in a 3-game stretch.
Yes, please. Now, listen, you don't get T. Higgins. You're not getting T. Higgins. I hate to
you know, burst that bubble right now?
Yeah, somebody's got to. Like, they're pulling up T. Higgins tweets from 2015. Of him saying, "See you soon, Nashville," or something like that. Relax. He's getting tagged.
He's a Tennessee native.
Okay.
There's a lot of Vols/Titans fans that are still bitter about missing out on him in his recruitment when he went to Clemson.
Understandably so. You're going to miss out on him again because Cincinnati's not dumb. They're going to tag him, okay? They want the good players to stay there. So you don't have Jamar Chase here. You don't have T. Higgins. Maybe you get a Tyler Boyd. He's a free agent. Maybe you get the third one. I don't know. But there's a lot to like about Cincinnati, but again, that comes back to his philosophical approach, what we played earlier, him talking about the offense, the passing game, the emphasis on it, the skill position players and the value of them, and how that vision came to light in Cincinnati. And the thing that they absolutely need to have here is exactly what he's described. Now, again, offensive line, wide receivers, you need some corners, you need to be able to get a defensive stop. There's a lot of problems here for this team that he's taking over.
Your biggest concern?
The roster. The coach doesn't fix the roster.
How much of that is going to have to do with Brian Callahan?
Well, that's something that I would like to hear Amy Adams Strunk answer, please.
She said she will, right? When she talked to Mike Keith.
I'm going to trust her. I'm going to take her at her word that she's going to tell us. Do you even care anymore? Other than just somebody say it so we can move on with our lives. I don't care how this gets done. Just don't screw it up. I mean, I do care a little bit about how this gets done, especially because they botched it the last 2 seasons. But I'm so tired of asking questions about, all right, who has final say? I don't care. Just pick better, sign better free agents than Andre Dillard, and make better draft decisions than Caleb Farley, Dylan Radins, Traylon Burks.
I would
Phillips.
like for it not to be as nebulous as it has been. And Mike Keith directly asked Amy Adams Strunk in that video when Mike Vrabel was fired, will there come a time where you make public who reports to the head coach, who reports to the general manager, who reports to you? She said yes.
I just,
Which one? There's several.
I said that to you in your ear, not over the ear.
Say that to me. Say that to anybody. Say it to somebody.
Okay, well, now that's just without context, and nobody knows what we're trying to do there. Well done by you. It's a huge show for us today. They hired a new head coach. What are you doing? Terrible. We'll take more of your phone calls on Brian Callahan getting hired as the next Titans head coach. 615-737-1045 is how you join the discussion. So we'll talk about how Brian Callahan is the polar opposite of Mike Vrabel, the guy that they just fired, coming up next. Welcome back to the show. So the Titans are hiring the complete opposite of Mike Vrabel in Brian Callahan. You're going to hear from an interview that Lucas did last week. Bailed me out on my sick day. Lucas and Bert did. Dave Lapham, who is the Bengals radio analyst, longtime offensive lineman for them back in the 70s when they were going to Super Bowls and things like that in their first iteration. He was asked a question about Brian Callahan and how he delivers a message, which is not insignificant if you're going to be now a new leader of men. This was Dave Lapham.
You know, the thing about Brian is it's a two-way street. Any time that you're, that you're dealing with Brian Callahan, he wants to hear what you have to say as much as deliver his message, because it may impact what he's going to deliver for a message. So, I mean, Brian Callahan is a very, very intelligent guy, and he wants as much information at his disposal before having an opinion, making a decision, whatever it may be. And your side of it is going to be critically important to him. So that's the one thing that I've learned about him is he's very, very inclusive. It's a democracy, man. It's not a dictatorship, and so it's very, very intriguing that way. But he will make the final call, but he will, research and open every avenue possible to help him make the best decision that he possibly can. So, before he does communicate his message, which he does exceedingly well. I mean, he's very bright. He's very articulate. He's impactful with his messages, but man, he makes sure before he delivers them that he feels comfortable about every word and every punctuation point.
So I've got two words in just that answer to replace the C word with: inclusive and democratic. It makes me even madder that we've spent 2 weeks using the C word over and over again. That's Dave Lapham of the Bengals Radio Network talking about the new Titans head coach, former Bengals OC, Brian Callahan. So now this video or this audio of, it just says Angry Brian on my sheet. Now, explain to me who Angry Brian is, why this is relevant, and courtesy of the Locked On Bengals podcast.
Well, why don't I let Brian Callahan explain it to you? He was asked the question from the Locked On Bengals podcast. What is Angry Brian like for a guy that's so seemingly calm, cool, and collected 24/7?
I think it's interesting, like the idea of Angry Brian. What's that like?
I have it in my personality. It's not something I don't enjoy that part of it. I'm much better off. I think I'm a much better coach when it's consistent and your demeanor is consistent and what you say and how you say it is consistent. I think those things matter because we ask the same of the players to be the same, be consistent, be the same guy when you walk in the building. And I try to do that myself, but there is a time and a place when things reach a point where you feel like that message needs to be delivered a different way. And I'm more than capable of delivering it in a different manner. But I do think that most coaching is most effective when you're teaching, when it's a moment where you're teaching and it's not just, the fire and brimstone and yelling and screaming and all that stuff. I think that gets tuned out pretty quickly most of the time. So I think it's effective in certain moments. And I think that I try to be as consistent as I can, but yeah, I'm certainly capable of delivering a firmer message when I feel like it might be a time and a place for that.
Okay. So do you know what I'm thinking of when he's speaking about how his approach, basically, as a leader, as a communicator, as a delegator, as somebody who's in charge of operating a unit and making sure that it works in sync. He reminds me a lot of Matt LaFleur. And it's not just because Matt has that same kind of subdued tone. And the answer is detailed, right? He's giving you a lot of insights into why he does things a certain way, why certain approaches don't work. He's somebody who's been around coaches his entire life. His father is a career coach. So he's seen a variety of different ways to go about this thing.
And the coaches he's worked under: John Fox, Gary Kubiak, Zach Taylor. It's a lengthy list.
Well, and but it reminds me of an exchange that Vrabel and LaFleur had in their first year together, their first training camp together, that I don't know that Mike necessarily understood was open to the media, where they're running some kind of offensive portion of practice, right? I can't remember if it's red zone, it's third down, it's something. And Vrabel's not happy with how slow they are getting up to the line of scrimmage, getting back into the huddle, like just kind of the pace of things. And he's barking as much at LaFleur as he is at the players out on the field. And you don't really hear what Matt says back to him, but you can tell that it's kind of just maybe a little snarky. and just the way that Vrabel whipped around, like that clip that they put out this summer of the team pushing sleds and stuff like that in the bubble. And somebody says in the background, "Says who?" And Mike Vrabel just whips around and says bleeping me, right? It's the whole highlight. It's one of the best parts of that clip, except that's not a similar approach, right? That's dictatorship. Says who? Says bleeping me, mother bleeper.
Yeah.
What are you talking about? Says me. I'm bigger than you. I'm badder than you. My way. This is how we do things around here. Versus what you just heard, which again comes back to the C word.
Coats.
It's going to make me laugh every time. 615-737-1045. Alex Mann says, wait, he's a Democrat? How many of you just jumped at your radio and said, you lib? How many of you? Be honest.
Let's not do that.
Be honest with me. I know it happened in some cars. Look at Lucas back there cheesing. He's scared I'm going to do election stuff. All right, we're fine. 615-737-1045 is the number. Andrew in Nashville's next.
Hey, how's it going, guys?
We're good.
I just want to know, are we going to go find some new coordinators? Or are we going to stay under Shane Bowen and Tim Kelly? Also, are we going to introduce Brian Callahan anytime soon in a press conference, or when can we expect that to happen?
I don't, no indications that they're going to do a press conference today. I think they're still working through logistics. They haven't officially announced as a team, so everybody's being real hush-hush, right? Nobody will confirm in the building that Brian Callahan is going to be the next head coach, and everybody knows that Brian Callahan's going to be the next head coach. So,
and you expect him to bring in his own coordinators?
Yes, I do. I don't, I can't speak for Bowen specifically, but I don't think Tim Kelly's going to be here as the OC. Oh, as the OC. Now, if Tim is in some other role, in some form or fashion, I don't know what that looks like necessarily. I know that, Tim's not interviewing anywhere else. Do you notice that? Like in the same way that other guys are, like Chris Harris?
Bowen has interviewed with Jacksonville, right? But Jacksonville made a hire.
Jacksonville made a hire, and then Tony Dews, the tight ends coach, is interviewing with the Jets today because they don't have enough Titans coaching cast-offs. You see the stuff coming out about Keith Carter in New York, by the way?
No.
Again, common theme, his players hate him. Sorry, bud. Rich in Smyrna's next.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I'm extremely pleased with their choice in the hire of Callahan. And I, first of all, hope that it shuts up some of the whiny fans who were crying because Amy didn't share a vision, which she didn't have to do to begin with. Maybe her actions speak louder than her words. And then the second thing is, and I haven't heard anybody talk about this yet, but as far as Callahan coming in and what he does with quarterbacks and who might be the possible wide receivers, what do you think about how much of a positive impact he can have on somebody already on the roster, and that being Traylon Burks?
Well, we'll have plenty of time to talk about that all offseason long. We appreciate the call, Rich. That felt like a shot at me. About the whininess and the vision. That felt like a shot.
Well, the hire lays out the vision in a way, does it not?
I'm just saying, it felt like Rich just took a knife and stuck it in my ribs and twisted it once. Whiner. Okay, Rich, I'm with you.
Do you disagree?
No. You happy? 615-737-1045 is the number. What the Titans hire says about their direction in today's NFL. We'll talk about it next.
It is 11:02. Good morning. I'm Lucas Panzica from the 104.5 The Zone studios. The Tennessee Titans reportedly have their man to be the next head coach. Adam Schefter reported on Monday night that the Titans are nearing a deal with Cincinnati Bengals offensive coordinator Brian Callahan to replace Mike Vrabel as the sixth head coach since the franchise moved to Tennessee. The 39-year-old was hired by Zach Taylor in Cincinnati in 2019 and has helped coordinate an offense that powered the Bengals to 2 AFC North titles and a Super Bowl appearance in 2021. Callahan's resume of quarterbacks he has coached includes Peyton Manning, Matt Stafford, Derek Carr, and Joe Burrow. For all your foundation repair and waterproofing needs, visit USSTN.com. Breaking news at once on your home for the Titans and Vols. This is 104.5 The Zone.
Second hour underway. Welcome in. Happy Tuesday. Titans fans, morale is high, it seems like, based on the reaction. Our boss was just in here, Paul Mason, our program director, commenting on, so the lines haven't been loaded. I said, no, people aren't angry. People are very happy. It's the nature of the beast, sports talk radio. We get some pleasant calls, some quiet suggestions. I'm sure the suggestions on who the new head coach, Brian Callahan, should hire will grow in the coming days as those things become available, and you guys will start armchair quarterbacking a little more, armchair coaching, armchair GMing, whatever the case may be, but the vibes seem to be pretty good.
It really is the biggest indicator of a happy versus pissed off fan base.
The phone lines?
Yes. The line graph of pissed off fans is directly correlated with how many phone calls we get.
So you can call at any point if you would like to comment on the newest hire from the Titans head coach. JR says, glad they finally announced Brian Callahan officially. Well, they haven't.
I have not seen that.
Yeah, that's not out there. So premature in the F&M Bank chat, which is often premature on a regular basis, but that's okay. We love them all the same. Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch. You can interact in there if you so choose. So what the Titans hire of Brian Callahan says about their place in the modern-day NFL. Well, it's not like they didn't try to modernize last year. The biggest difference is you had a coach who wanted more control over personnel decisions. The personnel decisions that he was primarily responsible for or can be primarily attributed to him did not pan out in ways that were beneficial. They were a worse version of a bad football team from 2022 to 2023. And the innovation that they tried to employ, some of the stuff that that you will see in the new wide zone scheme that Zach Taylor is going to run, that Brian Callahan is going to run, coming from Zach Taylor, the head coach in Cincinnati. All of it matters only as much as the players that you have to execute it. So again, this is the hurdle that the Titans have yet to overcome, the same way that we started the show. But Brian Callahan is going to put them in position to succeed in a variety of different facets. Now, with that, how many of these coordinator hires, these play call, because we'll talk about this. I put this out there this morning. I don't know how many other people have put it out there. I haven't necessarily seen, but his intention is to call the plays as the head coach.
So you have that on good authority?
Yes. That his plan, Brian Callahan, is to call the plays as the head coach instead of what we talked about with Dave Lapham kind of saying he may empower somebody, a coordinator, to call the plays, or he may set up the kind of system that they had in Cincinnati where he and Zach Taylor, Brian Callahan and Zach Taylor, are on the headset going back and forth, series by series, quarter by quarter, play by play, up until the 15-second cutoff in the coach-to-quarterback communication, talking about what play that Zach Taylor is going to call. So it's just that much. The only difference is who's the final voice. Okay, run that. But it is his intention to call the plays here. Most of the time in these recent hires, that has been a successful approach. Josh McDaniels being the latest failure, right? But as you look around the league and see the various offensive coordinators who have been hired as head coaches in the last couple of years, let's just take Kevin O'Connell as an example, Minnesota. What the Vikings were able to piece together on offense this year was similar. It felt like a similar vibe to me, Lucas. Do you remember, and Shanahan was the first one to do this, and this is from a similar system. Kevin O'Connell hired to Minnesota from the Rams, and of course McVay, Shanahan, the whole connection, on and on it goes. But the year that Shanahan had to find ways to win games with Nick Mullins, who was one of the Vikings quarterbacks this year, it was very similar. And all of a sudden, Shanahan is out there in a primetime football game. I can't remember if it was a Monday night game or a Thursday night game, but I remember watching that. And in one game for the San Francisco 49ers, Nick Mullins had thrown as many touchdown passes as Marcus Mariota had to that point of the season. And I remember looking around and being like, how the hell did they just do this with this guy from Southern Missouri? Or where was...
Nick Mullins is a Birmingham, Alabama native. He went to my rival high school. We were in high school about the exact same time. He torched us every year.
That's not my question. I don't care about your high school football career. Where did Brett Favre play at college?
You said, where is he from? Did you not?
I said, where did he go to college?
Oh, so it was your question. Southern Miss, Buck. How do you not know that Brett Favre went to Southern Miss?
I said Southern Missouri.
So
I was
off.
Close. It's not that far off. Relax. Is Nick Mullins also orchestrating a scheme to pay for Mississippi volleyball facilities around the state with public funds? Is that something that's happening? Similarities there as well?
He did
allegations.
Broke most of Favre's records at Southern Miss.
Anyway, so that they are hedging their bets, one, in favor of an offensive-minded coach who is going to benefit Will Levis as much as humanly possible and also kind of protect them from a drop-off that may happen if something happens to Levis and they have to play the backup quarterback. They have to be able to put a plan, a scheme in place to allow the backup quarterback to succeed. Kevin O'Connell is one of the more recent examples in Minnesota. I would say that hire has gone well. Prior to the Achilles tear, Kirk Cousins was the leading passer in football. He's at 30. He's the same age as Tannehill, so he's either 34 or 35, same draft class. Kirk Cousins was playing the best football of his career within that scheme. Now, Kirk has been able to put up numbers and produce on a regular basis, and they had been on the wrong side of one-score games this year, more so than they were last, because last year we talked about it. They were 11-0 in one-score games. It's not sustainable, just as Mike Vrabel's record in one-score games wasn't sustainable. So some of that stuff is going to come back to earth after a certain point. But these examples, O'Connell, McVay, Mike McDaniel, how many others can you name off the top of your heads that are offensive play calling head coaches right now in the league?
Nick Sirianni this past season.
Sirianni did, but
they just fired Brian Johnson, by the way.
Did they fire him?
Yes, the offensive coordinator in Philadelphia.
Oh. You think that seems unfair to do to him while he's out here looking for jobs to be a head coach? I don't love that.
But, yeah, Shanahan, McVay, Zach Taylor, Kevin O'Connell, Mike McDonald, Matt LaFleur, and this past season, Nick Sirianni. We'll see what happens moving forward if he decides to delegate those duties like he did when Steichen was in place.
Did you get scared of Steichen? Is that what happened?
I took the T out.
Careful. Get away from that SH.
Well, but what do a lot of those guys have in common, too, outside of Shanahan and McVay? Taylor, McDaniel, O'Connell, and Sirianni. We'll stick with those. What do those head coaches who called plays for their team this past season have in common?
Tell me.
They did not call plays in their last offensive coordinator stop before getting that head coaching opportunity.
That's right. Sirianni didn't call the plays.
No, Frank Reich did.
Frank
Reich did. Zach Taylor did not call the plays in L.A. Kevin O'Connell did not call the plays in L.A. Same goes for Mike McDaniel. Bobby Slowick, who called plays for the first time in his career this past season. And LaFleur, I put LaFleur in on that list. He had the 1 year of play calling experience here that wasn't exactly a glowing endorsement.
He got saddled with Marcus, and it looked not good. And Green Bay saw past it and said, no, this is the guy.
Yeah, Green Bay didn't hire him because of what he did here.
Right.
They hired him because of his career in totality, largely with the Rams.
Is this how NFL teams are going to have to do it? just on principle, to protect themselves from having their play caller taken in the next cycle. Because this is ultimately, I mean, there are a variety of different reasons why Mike Vrabel is no longer employed by this team. But the fact that he had to continually replace offensive coordinator how many different times? LaFleur, Art, Downing, and then Tim. He had 4 different offensive coordinators.
In 6 seasons.
In 6 seasons. But that's the league. John Harbaugh has done this. I mean, the Ravens, and I know it's going to pain Titans fans to hear this, and I would not say this to Bert's face because he wouldn't shut up if I did. But the Ravens are like the gold standard in the NFL, not named the Patriots. From a competitive standpoint year over year, the way that Harbaugh is able to consistently replace coordinators and not experience too big of a drop-off. I know it's not Ozzie Newsome running their drafts anymore. Eric DeCosta has been in that role for some time, although Ozzie Newsome is still, I think, in some form or fashion a consultant. But they've drafted remarkably well. Like, the Ravens are a gold standard, a gold tier NFL franchise for what they've been able to accomplish and how consistently they're able to repeat that success. In looking at what Shanahan has created in San Francisco, it's been a little bit of a different route. But the difference between Shanahan and Harbaugh is Harbaugh's having to replace coordinators year in and year out, and Kyle Shanahan is still out there calling the offense and cycling through these guys as he's had to replace coordinators. Now, defensive coordinators, there have been some ups and downs. I think they're not as good a unit under Wilks, Steve Wilks, as they were under Saleh and stuff like that. So,
still, you could do so much worse.
Oh, no, for sure.
What a run of defensive play callers from Saleh to Ryans to Wilks.
They're in a good spot, but the thing that they have protected themselves against the most is losing their offensive play caller, which is the thing that matters. I'm not going to say that it matters most in the league, that you get the quarterback right, matters most in the league, that you have a 4-man pass rush, matters second most in the league probably, and that you have an offensive line matters third. But on that list, offensive play callers are hard to find. There's not that many good ones. Just as the same as there's not 32 starting quarterbacks, there's not 32 starting offensive play callers in football.
Well, where is continuity in this day and age of the NFL more important, offense or defense?
Offense.
Every team in the NFL has had to replace their offensive play caller or / coordinator since 2022.
Defense, you can figure it out.
Insane.
Go get the quarterback in the meantime. Just go get him. Make sure you cover your guy. We'll figure it out afterwards. Offense, it's a little harder to put together. So the hires that Brian Callahan now has to get right as the Titans head coach, and some personnel changes that you can definitely rule out coming over from Cincinnati to Tennessee. We'll talk about that coming up next. Your phone calls too. I'm Buck Rising. It's 104.5 The Zone.
Life is busy. We could all use some extra time in our day, which is exactly why Two Rivers Ford offers mobile service. We'll bring the service to your driveway at no additional charge. Oil changes, brakes, batteries, the certified technicians at Two Rivers will perform basic maintenance on your vehicle wherever you are, so you'll have more time for moments like this. Schedule your mobile service appointment by scanning the QR code or calling Two Rivers Ford today.
So you got your head coach, not officially, but you got your head coach. Brian Callahan's going to be the next Titans head coach. The next question, what is the biggest hire that he has to make on that staff? Let's keep it to the coaching staff, right? Biggest hire, priority A, number one. What do you want to see? Now, maybe it's not the first hire that he makes, but what's the one that he has to get the most right? Ideally, you would like for him to get all of his coaching hires right. Realistically, there's going to be some that you like, some that you don't. We'll see if there's any holdovers. He'll have the opportunity to pick over Mike Vrabel's staff, what's left of it, by the time we get through the next couple of days. And we can talk about that more tomorrow, who you might want to keep from the previous coaching staff. But what is the one hire that they absolutely have to get correct? 615-737-1045. Now, keep in mind, his plan is to call the plays. Maybe that changes your level of priority for, say, an offensive coordinator. Because if you have your offensive play caller in your head coach, offensive coordinator is still important, but it is no longer the most important, right? We take that off the table. We can rule that out if Brian Callahan's plan is to call the plays here.
I'm between two. Offensive line coach or defensive coordinator.
All right, start with the defensive coordinator, because I think most people are going to go for your first one.
Offensive line coach.
Yeah. I think most people are going to say that first over defensive coordinator. Why is defensive coordinator, beyond the obvious, why is it important? Why is it the most important hire that he has to make for you?
Well, I don't know. That's what I'm saying. I'm between those two. I haven't made up my mind on what I think is the most important one, which one he needs to nail for the most, we'll say, short-term success. Because I think there is a very strong argument for offensive line coach with what you're looking at with Will Levis already having gone through some injury stuff in his rookie year. I think there's a strong argument to say that his offensive line coach hire is more important than his defensive coordinator hire right now, because of how it directly affects the future of the franchise with Will Levis.
There's a handful of people that are agreeing with you in the FNM Bank chat. We'll get to your phone calls on this in just a second. Steve Lamb, somebody named Sparky69 on YouTube, Will Anderson 1983 on YouTube, all saying defensive coordinator is the one that they have to get right, is the one that they have to get most right. Offensive line coach is so important. So important. You're probably not going to have a much better unit. Again, I'm not going to tell you that it can't get worse. It can always get worse. You're going to draft players on your offensive line. Your hope is that it improves. It may not happen right out of the gate. You want to put those guys that you bring in the best possible position to succeed. You want to do that with a proven offensive line coach who has a track record of success. Fortunately for you, one's the new head coach's dad. The other one is Mike Munchak, who used to play for you, who used to coach for you, and is apparently still interested in doing something in some form or fashion with you. Doesn't mean that it has to be those two guys, but those are pretty good options to start with. And there is a lot of indication that Brian's interest would be in hiring his dad, Bill, away from the Browns to come be the offensive line coach here. And whether or not that involves some kind of assistant head coach title, would you be comfortable with a setup like that? Well, we're going to talk more about that at noon. Don't answer that question yet. If you're going to say offensive line coach, Lucas, I'm going to say defensive coordinator. Because that's where I'm looking around and saying, all right, what are you doing? What are you doing here? It's not like Vrabel's defenses were ever the best. Statistically, they didn't ever rate high in a bunch of different categories beyond red zone. Red zone defense, always good. Always top tier. League's best red zone defense again last year, inexplicably. But it's not like Mike Vrabel's defenses were ever, great in Tennessee, right? So that's not something that you could implicitly trust the last coaching staff to get right, but there were some things there that made you feel like, okay, defensive side of the ball, you're not going to have too many concerns other than do they have the right personnel to pull off what they're trying to do. Brian Callahan is going to have to hire somebody to be the head coach of the defense. Because Brian Callahan he's the head coach of the football team. He'll have, executive decisions on a variety of different things. He's the head coach of the offense. You need a head coach of the defense. What the candidates for that look like, I'm going to be fascinated to see. Like I said, this guy's a career coach. He's been in the league in some form or fashion his entire life. So he will know the best people to choose from, the best people to call, the people that we aren't talking about that are known in the league but aren't known at a wider scale level. But the defensive coordinator here, to me, is as important, if not more important, than the offensive line coach, even as I understand that the offensive line coach is going to be one of the most scrutinized position coaching hires this franchise has made in the last decade.
Here's the thing, though. I feel like you can get a mulligan on the defensive coordinator hire if it doesn't work with Brian Callahan and everything else is in place on the offensive side of the ball. And there is a clear direction and future there with Will Levis. You'll get another swing at the defensive coordinator hire if that doesn't work out on your first try. I don't know that you get a mulligan on a quarterback on getting Will Levis injured in his second year, when that is the biggest variable around hiring Brian Callahan, right? Building around Will Levis and his resume at the quarterback position. If that's the most important thing about why you hired Brian Callahan, then wouldn't the key factor in protecting that asset be at the top of the list?
Yes. But they're the hypothetical that you've posed is something that I just assume is going to happen anyway, regardless of who's playing offensive line. I'm assuming, and God forbid, right? You want him to stay healthy all 18 weeks, all 17 games, through the playoffs and on into the offseason. You want him to be as healthy as humanly possible for as long as humanly possible. He's going to get hurt at some point. There's only so much that you can do, whether he's got the best offensive line coach in football and a less than offensive line group that's coached up or whatever. You're right. You can get a mulligan on the defensive coordinator in this situation. But in the immediate, you just have so many questions across the board that have to be answered. Again, the issue with the Tennessee Titans at its core was not the coaching staff, even though the coaching staff is being replaced. The issue at the core of the Tennessee Titans is the roster, and that includes the defensive side of the football. And a defense, by the way, that could stand to be improved by better coaching, as evidenced by Amy Adams-Strunk's statement, or the video, where she's saying it's not just about the offensive side of the ball. Defensively, they could be better too. They're giving up explosive plays left and right. Chris Harris, for as many defensive coordinator interviews as that guy got, I did not hear glowing endorsements from him about him as a defensive backs coach, which surprised me because that was one of the most popular names floating around there. That's one of the people that Titans fans seem to want the most, and that was the position group that arguably took the biggest dip. The offensive line was already bad. It just got worse.
I understand that nailing the defensive coordinator hire is the most important thing in regards to building the most well-rounded coaching staff possible under Callahan, and that maybe you could win despite subpar offensive line play, much like the Bengals did in 2021. Mm-hmm. I mean, the Bengals were sitting there with, what did they pick Jamar Chase with? Was he the 4th overall top 5? I can't remember the exact pick.
I'm going to ask Siri on the air.
Definitely a top 10 pick where they took Jamar Chase.
Siri, when did the Bengals draft Jamar Chase? Oh, she doesn't talk. 5th.
She's not paying attention.
Well,
okay.
no, she answered the question. She just doesn't. She just doesn't.
Top 5 pick on Jamar. Remember what?
That's disappointing.
What was arguably the Bengals' biggest need going into that draft?
Offensive line.
It was Penei Sewell or Jamar Chase. They prioritized skill positions. They got to the Super Bowl anyway. So I'm not saying you can't win with below-average offensive line play in a Brian Callahan system as opposed to a Tim Kelly or Todd Downing system. And yes, for the most well-rounded coaching staff, you've got to nail the defensive coordinator. But I just get really hung up on the importance of keeping Will Levis upright and healthy. And I put that above all else.
No, sure.
All else.
I hear you.
Because you can take another swing on defense. If you're scoring points and you're losing games 45-42.
Detroit survived a bad defense.
Yeah.
The best teams in football, the best offenses in football can survive to an extent a bad defense. The Tennessee Titans in 2020 survived a terrible defense.
Yep. Won the division.
Because they could score points.
You're not going to survive a poor offense. You're not going to survive going through a quarterback carousel unless you grab Joe Flacco at the right time and get hot at the end of the season. So to me, offensive line coach, especially in the short term, I still put above defensive coordinator.
615-737-1045 is how you can join the discussion. What hire does Brian Callahan absolutely have to nail first and foremost? Let's start with John in Murfreesboro.
What's up, Buck? I am inclined to agree with you that defensive coordinator is more important. This is assuming that he gets either Callahan or Munch as his O-line coach. To Lucas's point, I think if he hires either one of them, he gets a mulligan on the O-line if they perform badly, because those two are extremely well-known qualities. Callahan is known as the best offensive line coach in the NFL, and if they can't fix that line, then who reasonably could? So at that point, you're just banking on them doing bare minimum a better job than we've done anyway. The DC has to be at least something of a hit just to keep them in games. The O-line can protect Levis all day long, but if the defense can't stop an offense, you're playing shootouts. And the Saints, post their Super Bowl run, are a perfect example of that. They could put up points all day long, but they kept losing games because the defense couldn't stop a nosebleed. The offensive line position, it's going to take more than just a coach. That's going to take an overhaul of the position itself, while coupled with either Callahan or Munch as the coach for that position, and they'll do fine with whatever they've got. So I think defensive coordinator is more important.
Thank you for the call. 60 seconds on the clock before the Oscars music starts. So how do you feel about the way that he's just kind of framed it? Because I'm inclined to agree with him as well. This offensive line group is not just a one-year fix. They let it devolve for 3 years. So while they are currently in a position to improve it, a rookie left tackle is going to look like a rookie left tackle no matter who his offensive line coach is. All right? There are going to be moments, whether it's Joe Alt, whether it's the Penn State kid, whether it's A tackle that maybe you draft a wide receiver in the first round and go tackle in the second round. I don't think that's recommended. I don't think that's going to be the strategy, but we'll see how the draft board breaks and things like that, right? They are more than a one-year fix. Detroit and their offensive line group took them, the better part of 3 or 4 seasons, a couple of different coaching staffs to draft players high in the first 2 days of the NFL draft along their offensive line to build that thing organically to the point where now it's a machine. It's rolling, right? Some of them, like Decker, are on second contract. Some of them, like Penei Sewell, are still playing under their rookie deals. They've all got pretty good pedigrees across the board. You don't have to do it exclusively through the draft. You can patchwork some of this together, and free agency with cap space will provide you the opportunity to do that. But the thing that you have to avoid most in this particular free agency is the overspend on the offensive line. You can't do that. There's not going to be that kind of quality free agent out there. The cost is not worth the return on investment. By the way, do you know what I just saw Kaharski tweet out? That based on the compensatory situation, the Philadelphia Eagles are going to get a 5th-round draft pick back for Andre Dillard.
Now that's good business.
That hurts. That they're getting a draft pick back for that guy? Come on. There has to be some kind of rule. Surely we can rewrite the NFL handbook on the compensatory draft situation. That you get a pick for that guy just by percentage of snaps that he played and stuff like that. But that's trash.
Played a lot of snaps.
He sure did. He sure did. You're welcome, Philadelphia. Titans just insist on granting Philadelphia favors. Chris is in Bowling Green next.
Yeah, I've got to agree that the O-line coach is going to be number one. And if it is his dad, do you think that dynamic between the two is going to work out and there's not going to be some headbutting there with Brian wanting to be the play caller?
Oh, I mean, I have no idea what their dynamic would be like. That it would just be speculative of me to comment on that. I don't know. I've heard a lot of things about the two men. I've never met them, never seen them interact amongst one another, never interacted with them myself personally. So I can't comment on how that might or might not work. The thing that stands out about the Bill Callahan hire, what jumps out to you about his circumstance in Cleveland?
Well, the job he's done in Cleveland?
How would you describe the starting Browns offensive line group?
When healthy, one of the best in the league.
One of the best in the league. They have talent all over the place. They had injuries all over the place this year. They survived injuries this year for the most part. They weren't completely unscathed, because when guys like Conklin go down, and Jack Conklin has not missed a ton of time since going to Cleveland, by the way. Good on Jack for the way that he's been able to hold up there. I'm blanking on the Alabama guy they drafted a couple of years ago. The left tackle, the 1st-round pick.
Cleveland?
Yes. Oh, this is going to make me insane. Wirfs is in Tampa. Who's the other one?
Yeah, I'm blanking on it.
It's the same draft. Anyway, guys like I'm blanking on all of the Browns offensive lineman names. 70. I can see their numbers. 77.
You're thinking of Jedrick Wills.
Jedrick Wills. Okay, so Jedrick Wills, a talented player. Jack Conklin, a former 1st-round pick. Joel Bitonio, right? Ethan Posich. These are talented players. These are good quality NFL offensive linemen. So Cleveland has something beyond Bill Callahan that you don't have. They have good players up front. Whoever you hire, yes, they have to be capable at doing their job. But it's almost a chicken before the egg type of discussion with the current Titans O-line, because every one of those dudes not named Skoronski can probably get the hell out of here. Radens and NPF are going to be here.
Jalen Duncan's going to be here.
Jalen Duncan is going to be here.
But we can't say the same for Brewer or Dillard. Or
no, Dillard. First plane, train, automobile, Uber economy, out of here, bud.
As far as the dynamic between Brian and Bill, if that were to be the case, nobody could answer that question on if that would work more than those two guys, right? I mean, Bill's had a huge influence on Brian. He grew up around Bill coaching. He grew up around, he was throwing the football around with Rich Gannon when Bill was the head coach of the Raiders. Nobody can answer that question better than those guys, so we're not going to sit here and speculate on that.
615-737-1045. We'll take more of your phone calls coming up next. The piece of Brian Callahan's resume that no one is talking about. We'll do that. I'm Buck Rising, 1045 The Zone. Song Refugee makes me think of Andre Dillard, a refugee. I still cannot get over the idea that Philadelphia is getting a compensatory pick back for that guy.
I love this song.
It is a great song. You could do a lot worse than Tom Petty on this Tuesday. Welcome back to the show. Lucas is going to tell us here in just a second the piece of Brian Callahan's resume that no one is talking about, but first some calls.
Can't wait to hear your reaction, by the way.
737-1045. Is it going to be a positive reaction or a negative? I've been overwhelmingly positive today.
You have.
I don't think we could say that about any show that I've done in the last 3 years. I don't think I've had a negative moment yet, other than yelling at you for something.
Still time.
Okay. Keep an eye on the clock. Meanwhile, James is in Bellevue. Hey, James.
Hey there, and not trying to get negative, but, it being a transition period, looking back at the Vrabel era and then kind of coming into the Callahan area at a higher level, what changes can the front office make in terms of management and, doing that C-word stuff to, really sustain success? And, 6 years from now, I just don't want to be in the same position we are. Thank you.
Oh, I mean, James, you're going to be in the same position that's football, but I can't promise you that it's going to be great for the rest of your life, that you're going to stumble into your next Bill Belichick, Tom Brady, Pat Mahomes, Andy Reid, 6 years. Brother, if you make it 6 more years without having to do something like this, you're one of the best organizations in sports. That's just the nature of how this stuff works. So I can't tell you with any great confidence that this is your solution for a decade plus of football. No. Nobody in the NFL really gets that kind of run unless you land on the greatest quarterback of all time, Brady, or what seems like he might push Brady for the greatest quarterback of all time in Mahomes. Beyond that, you're trying to figure it out as you go. What can the front office do different? Well, that's a great question, because this is going to be more driven by them this season than it was at any point last season. And when I say them, I mean Rand, I mean Chad Brinker, I mean Anthony Robinson, I mean the people that work under them, I mean the staff changes that they're going to make under them, and how Brian Callahan fits within that new kind of, I don't want to say new role, but how he better fits in that role than did Vrabel. Vrabel did things a certain type of way. He was the established figure here. They deferred to him in ways that may not have been the best decision. And it ultimately didn't work out. But I can't promise you that you're not going to have to go through this again in 6 years. That's the NFL successfully builds this sport for parity. Just not like they're trying to sandbag you once every 6 years, or we were just talking to Blaine yesterday about getting a new laptop. Blaine and Mickey yesterday when we were changing shifts, and I think Blaine's had his MacBook for a decade. And Mickey said he had his one previously until one day an update just finally did it in. The update was too much for the old laptop to handle. He had to get a new laptop. Not saying that the NFL designs this thing to where you have to get a new head coach every once in a while. But 6 years is a great run. Mike Vrabel just had a great run. Not a lot of people get a contract with their NFL organizations, and that window is getting shorter and shorter. All right, tell me what's the thing we're not talking about the most with Callahan's resume?
Well, his quarterback resume is as impressive as any, right? And we're going to talk about it ad nauseum over the course of the next few weeks, I imagine. Peyton Manning, Joe Burrow, Matt Stafford, Derek Carr, what he did with Jake Browning, the reviews from these players about Brian Callahan, huge feather in his cap. What about Tim Tebow?
Oh, wait, which Tim Tebow? Denver Tim Tebow?
2011. Denver, 6-game win streak, playoff win, Tim Tebow.
Oh, my God, that might be his best work.
Brian Callahan was an offensive quality control analyst with the Denver Broncos. John Fox, head coach, defensive-minded guy. Mike McCoy was the offensive coordinator, and Adam Gase was the QB coach. So there were a lot of voices there, right? Not like Callahan was the play caller calling the shots for Tebow, but Brian Callahan was instrumental in Tebow's success in bringing concepts that worked for Tebow at Florida to the pros that nobody else was using in the NFL. Tim Tebow rattled off a 6-game win streak where his QBR was over 100 on 3 different occasions. And at what point in Tebow's career did you look at him as a guy that could win you a playoff game throwing for 300 yards?
Never.
At no point.
Never.
Except for the time that he did it.
Belichick, that's when we should have known that Belichick may be a little more smoke and mirrors than he actually was. when they got Tebow, and it was just like, oh, God.
Dan Pompei of The Athletic wrote a fantastic article in August of 2022. I'd encourage any Titans fan to go back and read it. It's called What Makes Bengals Offensive Coordinator Brian Callahan a Rising NFL Coach. He goes through, and you get quotes from every quarterback he's ever worked with on why Callahan was a good coach for them at that point in their career. And the way that he would pull concepts and things that those QBs are comfortable with and see what works for them. Not so much for Peyton Manning, where for Peyton, he was more of just a deep dive guy. You know, he was doing a lot of homework for Peyton and bringing him things when it came to game planning and upcoming defenses. But when it came to Tim Tebow and Joe Burrow, the young quarterbacks that Callahan worked with, Stafford was a vet by the time Callahan got to Detroit. Carr was a vet by the time Callahan got to Oakland. But the way he pulled concepts they were already comfortable with, and I fall on this excerpt from the Pompei article about Joe Burrow. As the Bengals prepared to play the Chiefs in the AFC Championship game in the 2021 season, Burrow told Callahan he preferred to have Jamar Chase run a fade on the backside of a red zone concept instead of the route that Callahan initially intended Chase to run. Callahan listened to his quarterback. He changed the route. Late in the third quarter of that 27-24 Bengals victory in Kansas City, Chase scored on a 2-yard reception from Burrow on the fade Burrow had suggested with his old college teammate Jamar Chase from LSU. The things that he did with Tim Tebow as well, again, pulling things that Tebow did at Florida that nobody else in the NFL was doing, is a huge feather in his cap as part of that quarterback resume. He helped Tim Tebow throw for 300 yards in a playoff game and win.
I still remember watching that Steelers-Broncos playoff game. Do you ever do one of those like cabin trips with a bunch of your friends? And this is not like a bottle service question, but in college, you ever do one of those big cabin trips with your buddies? Go to Sevierville or Gatlinburg or something like that?
Oh yeah.
We did one of those rental cabins, a bunch of us, my freshman year, and there was only like 3 channels that the TV at the cabin was getting, and one of them was the Pittsburgh-Denver playoff game. That was wild. I remember watching that finish and just being shocked when he hit Demaryius Thomas.
The Demaryius Thomas, rest in peace, catch and run. So it is interesting to go through and hear from every quarterback he's ever worked with and the way he's had to adapt with the different personality of Peyton Manning to Matt Stafford, right? And then Matt Stafford to Derek Carr. Like, these are completely polar opposite personalities in the way that they play, and then to Joe Burrow and now with Will Levis, which makes me wonder, as we rattle through offensive coordinator candidates for the Titans, do we need to be talking about Liam Cohen?
Yes.
Who is at Kentucky?
Sure. I think it's going to be Thomas Brown, the former Panthers offensive coordinator. He may, they may explore the Cohen situation. I haven't heard anything to that effect yet. Callahan may have people from his background or from other stops that he may be interested in as offensive coordinators, but right now it feels like Thomas Brown's the favorite. But I'm definitely open to having the Cohen conversation. I'm shocked that more teams don't do that. In the same way, like, I loved when they drafted Waddle for Tua. Stuff like that, like Burrow and Jamar. Now, maybe you're not going to get that to fall in line as easily as those two organizations did just because of the places that they were drafting over the course of several years. But I love that continuity in some form or fashion from what these guys are doing in college to get them in the best position to succeed and then take another step with them as they get further and further away from their college careers. But to have something that you can lean on right out the gate, whether that's a player that you played with in college or a coach that you used to have that you vibe with, I'm always surprised when NFL organizations don't explore that possibility more.
Brian Callahan explores that possibility a lot. He wants to adapt to his players, not the other way around. What's Wan'Dale Robinson's contract status?
He's probably got 2 years left on a rookie deal, I would think. Why, future Titan Wan'Dale Robinson? You thinking about it? Okay. Wide receiver's going to be a need here perpetually, it feels like.
Barrion Brown will be draft eligible after this coming season. Was one of Levis's favorite targets was Levis's favorite target in his last season at Kentucky when Brown was a true freshman. Robinson's deal runs through 2025, so 2 more years.
Duck Falling on YouTube says, this is a 2 Americas moment. Y'all went to cabins. We went to Atlanta to check out Magic City, 2 Americas. Well, I recommended Magic City to Lucas on his last Atlanta trip. You did not go, it's my understanding.
It was against my will. I wanted to try the wings.
I have been to Magic City for the Lou Williams special. I have also Uber Eats the Lou Williams special from Magic City. The last time the Titans and Falcons played a preseason game. I'm very familiar with Magic City's fare. Phrasing. More of your phone calls coming up next. The final hour. Brian Callahan plans to call the plays. What does that mean? Are you excited about it? We'll talk about it next.
It is 12:02. Good afternoon. I'm Lucas Panzica from the 104.5 The Zone Studios. The Tennessee Titans reportedly have their man to be the next head coach. Adam Schefter reported on Monday night that the Titans are nearing a deal with Cincinnati Bengals offensive coordinator Brian Callahan to replace Mike Vrabel as the sixth head coach since the franchise moved to Tennessee. The 39-year-old was hired by Zach Taylor in Cincinnati in 2019. He has helped coordinate an offense that powered the Bengals to 2 division titles and a Super Bowl appearance in the 2021 season. Callahan's resume of quarterbacks he has coached includes Peyton Manning, Matt Stafford, Derek Carr, and Joe Burrow. That makes the Titans the first team to hire an external candidate as their head coach, but On3 Sports reporting today that Jim Harbaugh and the LA Chargers are in striking distance of getting a deal done. For all your foundation repair and waterproofing needs, visit USSTN.com. Breaking news at once in your home for the Titans and Vols. This is 104.5 The Zone.
Final hour. Show feels like it just started. There's big news in the world of the local professional football team. Brian Callahan hired as the next head coach. Announcements forthcoming here in the very near future. 615-737-1045 is the number. You can join the discussion. We'd be happy to have you. Get back to your phone call. Some of you have been waiting patiently. We will do so here in just a few seconds. I do want to talk about a little bit of advancing on this, not just the Brian Callahan. I believe Schefter had it first last night, right? It was either Schefter or Pelissero. I didn't see which of the two. I know they were right within seconds of one another. But either way, them reporting first on the news last night, and then trying to do some digging on our own about Brian Callahan, why him, what makes the most sense beyond all the obvious things that we spent, the better part of 2 weeks talking about. Vetting candidates, checking boxes. He checks the most. So it's my understanding here that his plan is to call plays. He did not call plays in Cincinnati as their offensive coordinator. That job was Zach Taylor's. Lucas, do you want to play again? We've played that audio of Dave Lapham so many times talking about the offensive play calling situation for the audience, but I don't think it hurts on the day that he's hired to play it again. This was Dave Lapham, the Bengals radio analyst, kind of explaining to Lucas in my absence last week the dynamic between Zach Taylor, the Bengals head coach and play caller, and Brian Callahan, the former offensive coordinator, now turned Titans head coach.
Because, I think to be a successful head coach in the National Football League, you can have a coordinator, you can have a play caller. There's a few head coaches in the NFL that do call plays, but there are still coordinators that call plays. And in Brian's case, I'm sure he would have a coordinator in mind that he would probably empower to call the plays, or it might be a joint effort. And, make no mistake about it. Zach Taylor calls the plays, but Brian Callahan is part of the dialogue with Zach Taylor every single play until, time doesn't allow any more debate or conversation about it, and then Zach Taylor will make a decision. But Brian Callahan has tremendous input on a play-by-play basis, even though he's not the voice that is going into the helmet of the quarterback in terms of the actual play call. And in terms of game planning, it's a big part of it. A large part of it is his baby. Now, he's got his other offensive coaches contributing. There's no question about that. And Zach Taylor, gets his fingers and thumb into it a little bit as well. But Brian's the coordinator of that, putting all of that together. And he's done a pretty darn good job. I think, too, from a football standpoint, a head coach, in my mind, in this era of football, has to be able to deliver a clear message. And Brian Callahan is as good a communicator as I've worked with. I mean, the guy is unbelievable in terms of having a message and being able to communicate that message. And then the other thing is relationship building. I mean, in today's era, that's a very, very important thing with today's athlete. And Brian Callahan is unbelievably talented in terms of his people skills, building relationships with, players, coaches, everybody in the organization. I mean, as far as a football coach, he's immensely talented. As far as being a human being, he's even more so. The dude is just one hell of a good guy, no matter what profession he's in.
Okay, it's a glowing endorsement from Dave Lapham. But the dynamic between him and Taylor is the thing to kind of highlight there. So, if Brian Callahan is going to come here and assume the role of play-calling head coach in the same way that Zach Taylor did.
Which you're saying is going to be the case.
His plan is to call the plays in Tennessee. Who is going to be the Brian Callahan for Brian Callahan? Who fills that role? Now, there's any number of people that Brian Callahan will have connections to. And it'll be curious to see how all that stuff, how one willing to kind of describe how that's going to work with us, they're going to be. Are you going to expand on how much this is going to take you away from responsibilities that a head coach might otherwise have, who you're going to delegate those responsibilities to, how you and Zach Taylor orchestrated that in a way that did not hinder Zach Taylor from other head coaching responsibilities, right? Because at the end of the day, being an offensive coordinator is infinitely different than being a head coach of an NFL team. Now you're asking somebody to do both of those jobs in some form or fashion. It's not a small ask.
And Zach Taylor's been very open about Callahan's role in structuring the offense and game planning and on game day.
It's my understanding that their system in Cincinnati is as much Brian Callahan's baby as it is Zach Taylor's. So who is Brian Callahan's Brian Callahan? Well, Thomas Brown.
Moses Moody.
That felt a bit square peg round hole. I felt you missed Kendrick Perkins' voice. I felt you haven't played it in a while. I felt you just wanted to jam that one in there.
That's correct.
Okay. I'm not mad. It's just such a ridiculous audio clip. I forget how bad a moment that was and how many times it delights me to hear Reese Davis just kind of correcting him sternly. Moses Moody in the background. Professional broadcasters. Kendrick Perkins tumbles all over himself.
So Zach Taylor and Brian Callahan worked together in Los Angeles.
Mm-hmm.
So that relationship was already
pre-existing
there when he brought him, when Taylor was hired in 2019. The names that we've brought up for offensive coordinator, Thomas Brown, Brian Callahan has not worked with. Liam Cohen, I'm not sure if they would have ever overlapped in Los Angeles.
No, Cohen was just there for the year, right?
Yeah, I believe so. The 2021 season?
No, 2022.
22.
Because Levis' down season after a good season with Cohen.
No, Liam Cohen actually was the assistant wide receivers coach in Los Angeles in 2018. So they had one season together in L.A.
Oh, interesting.
Cohen and Callahan worked together for one season.
Now, you know who else was on that Rams staff?
Thomas Brown.
Thomas Brown, who was on that Rams staff from 2020 to 2022 before taking the OC job in 2023. Lucas, he was a running backs coach for a year before they made him the assistant head coach.
Never overlapped with Callahan.
No, but that they thought that Sean McVay thought highly enough of this person to promote him from running backs coach. I believe, if I need to go back and look at Thomas Brown's resume again, I believe the Rams was his first pro job. It was.
That's correct, yeah.
The running backs coach. Mm-hmm. After being in college primarily, the former Georgia running back Thomas Brown. So he's in L.A. for a year before Sean McVay makes him an assistant head coach for 2 years, including the Super Bowl year, which was 2021. So it's not inconsequential. And they're all coming from the same system. And, you know, right now, if you made me pick a favorite in the clubhouse to be Brian Callahan's Brian Callahan, I would say Thomas Brown.
Why is that? Apart from what we've just talked about. Because from our conversations just now, Liam Cohen, at surface level, you would find more information on putting him as the favorite with his relationship with Will Levis. So why do you think Thomas Brown is at the top of that list?
Because he's already interviewed here twice. Because he was one of the three that they requested to have an in-person interview on the same day that they decided on a head coach. I don't think that's coincidental. Like, I think there were some. Again, now I'm drifting into speculation. I want to make sure that I'm clarifying here. But I think it's actually. Can you play the reckless speculation sound, please, if you would be so kind? I'm pretty sure they told Thomas Brown, hey, this is who's getting the head coaching job. We'd love for you to work here as the offensive coordinator. We think you'd be a really good fit. Stick around.
You're pretty sure they told him that, or you are speculating?
I'm speculating. Okay. I'm speculating that. That's why I asked for the reckless speculation sound. Thank you. Jerry in Nashville is next. Hey, Jerry.
Fellas.
How are you?
I'm doing good. Hey, listen, it's always going to be about offense in this league. Y'all guys know it. If you don't believe it, look at the pathetic Jets. What a disaster. If you don't have an offense, you dang gone ain't going to win. The one thing about it, all this stuff will work itself out with the Callahan connection. But the thing about it is if Levis goes out there like he just did a line of cocaine every time he lines up and gets his shit knocked out.
No, Jerry.
Man, it was going so well.
You can't say that word. I do agree with him, though. Again, that's reckless speculation. Of course, we don't know that Will Levis is doing that pregame. But you can't do that, Jerry. Come on.
You agree with him with what?
That Will Levis has the appearance of somebody who would be ripping a line and running out there, screaming red-faced and veiny out of the tunnel.
He's an intense guy.
He is a very intense guy.
Which will be an interesting clash of personalities, too, right? Levis and Callahan.
Well, but that worked to Levis's benefit this year because he already kind of has somebody in DeAndre Hopkins, who is much more the Callahan temperament than is Will Levis. Trippin' Titan says you can't say bleep, the S word, but you can say the C word. Well, no, the C word is something that we as a show have banned. It's not the actual C word. It's our C word. How many people are just jumping in their cars for the first time, just terrified?
We're talking about the word collaboration.
No, you can't say it. Stop it. Pick something else. I'm tired of it. That's the C word. 615-737-1045 is the number. Unless he was talking about the C word being cocaine. I don't think that's banned from the FCC. Somebody will tell me. Anyway, we'll talk more about what Callahan's hire means for Will Levis and his quarterback resume next. Get back to your phone calls here in just a second. We'll also talk about the next dominoes that could fall. Titans are the first team to hire a coach that wasn't an in-house candidate. Amy Adams Strunk, true to her word, didn't want to wait in the back of the line, wait on a Mike Vrabel trade, get bogged down by the process that could take. Moved on from one head coach, hired another in 2 weeks, almost flat.
Exactly 2 weeks.
Well, not exactly 2 weeks. They would have had to hire him at 11 o'clock this morning to be exactly 2 weeks from the time that they fired Vrabel. So just a little less.
It isn't officially official yet.
Well, then it still wouldn't be exactly 2 weeks, Lucas, because it's 12:20 now.
You are simply too nitpicky. You know that?
You're not the first relationship that I've had that disappointed that. So, speaking of pointing things out, what does this mean for Will Levis? Does it, and listen, Brian Callahan's going to be asked this question. He'll answer it however he answers it. But I think that there is some sense that Brian Callahan taking this job means decisively that Will Levis is the future of the Tennessee Titans, right? Is that how you receive this news? Do you think fans are receiving this news that way, that they have found the coach to help shepherd in the next decade for our franchise quarterback? Do you feel like that's landing with people like that today?
Yes. I feel like that's how the Titans conducted this search, with Will Levis at the forefront.
I'm going to disagree with the notion that it definitively means that Will Levis is the future. What it means to me is that Will Levis is good enough for the present. Will Levis is the present. He's no longer the future. He can be more of your future depending on how this experiment goes. And Brian Callahan may think more of him or less of him, or however Brian Callahan views him. I don't know until we talk to him. But I don't think that you should take this sight unseen as, okay, this guarantees that this is going to be the guy to help Will Levis achieve, a decade plus of successful football as a Tennessee Titan.
Well, that's partially up to Will Levis, but
sure,
you don't think that that's how they approached this thing? Seeking out the candidate that could maximize what they currently have in their soon-to-be second-year quarterback?
Yeah, on a 3-year window while he's cost-effective. That doesn't mean that you're married to him beyond that contract.
Yeah, nothing's guaranteed.
Well, no, but
beyond
that's
the rookie deal,
Lucas. But I think I just asked you that question to see if you felt like it was landing on people that way today, and you responded yes.
I think the Brian Callahan era in Tennessee will be determined by fans by what he does with Will Levis.
That's a better way to have this discussion. Is Will Levis the thing that determines Brian Callahan as a success or failure? Because, again, I'm willing to argue. Now, Mike Vrabel got a chance at a second quarterback and then was fired the year after drafting the new quarterback. So let's not. We're getting way too ahead of ourselves in the exercise because they haven't even announced the hire yet officially. I do think that you're correct in positioning it that way, though, that fans are going to deem Callahan a success or failure based upon what happens with Will Levis. I'm so fascinated to see what they do with him. How much better he can get. Because there's a lot of room for improvement, and I think, if you asked 100 people around the league, maybe 55 of them would tell you that the Tennessee Titans have a quarterback, and 45 would tell you, yeah, TBD. Where I think, here locally, people are so much more sold on him as the future, and he's got some promising stuff that you are willing to attach yourself to. Also, in a season where you were wretched, you're just looking to attach yourself to someone that signifies hope, promise of improvement, of success, of change, of better quarterback play, all the things that you want out of this.
Those things can be mutually exclusive, can't they? You can say, yeah, Will Levis, it's not a guarantee that in 4 or 5 years, Will Levis is your franchise quarterback. Nothing is a guarantee in that regard. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, that Brian Callahan and the Callahan era in Tennessee will be largely defined by what he does with Will Levis.
Largely defined, yes. Now you've moved though since you made that statement. You said exclusively from Will Levis, and now you're saying largely.
Semantics.
No, the words matter here, bud. 615-737-1045 is how you join the discussion. David is in Brownsville up next. Maybe David's in Brownsville up next.
Hey.
Hey.
Sorry. Hey, good afternoon, Buck.
How are you?
I'm good. I have a statement and a question. All right, statement first. I do believe that Brian Callahan's decision to actually come to Tennessee was largely based as well on Will Levis's abilities. And my question is, what does this mean for Malik Willis? Do you think that Brian Callahan can turn him into a Jake Browning? Thank you.
I appreciate the call, David. So, again, a question that I look forward to asking Brian Callahan. How much did Will Levis have to do with the decision to come here? Because what has to do with the decision is he wants to be an NFL head coach. This is an NFL team offering him a job. Levis can be a part of that decision. I don't know that it has to be primarily based off Will Levis. I don't think that's an overt driving factor here. I think it helps. I think it's ancillary, though. So, for Malik, I mean, this gives him as good a fighting chance as any he's had, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. You feel like his chances are better with this scenario as opposed to, another year of Vrabel.
Sure. We're Vrabel all but, I don't know how much Mike wanted him to begin with, like as a draft pick. That's been discussed and kind of, there's always been some scuttlebutt around the facility about that. Like how in was Mike Vrabel actually on the Malik Willis pick? Only Mike can answer that question. But it did feel like at the end that they just kind of gave up on it. Just like okay, Tannehill, come on. Let's get out there, bud. And listen, they won the last game of the season. It didn't save his job, but they felt like they had put a bow on that chapter of their quarterback position with Malik. Now, given that he made substantial strides from his rookie training camp to his second, they were not good enough for him to be a replacement level starter at the NFL level, for sure. Can he make more substantial improvements in another training camp? He'll have the opportunity to do so, and he'll do so with a coaching staff that may be in his better interests than the one previous. Not that they were actively working against Malik Willis or something like that, but it did feel like, they closed the door on Malik 2 years in when it was always going to be a slow burn with that dude.
DeMario on the F&M Bank chat says, I don't think we've seen enough to say Will Levis is a franchise quarterback.
I agree.
He has shown enough to say we may have something, but need more time to tell.
Will Levis could be anything from Josh Allen to Carson Wentz.
Sure. And we all agree on that, right? I don't think nobody should be making sweeping proclamations that he is the future of the franchise. Nobody knows. We have no idea what's going to pan out over the next couple of years. What I'm somewhat confused on with you is your stance on how much the Callahan era in Tennessee does hinge on Will Levis's success.
It's not. It's obviously important. I don't think it is so consequential that they could not survive Will Levis not achieving the fullest heights of what it. I think that Lucas, you just said that very plainly, like what you said about Will Levis not being the future of the franchise, or like that nobody is making declarative statements that way. And I would argue that there's a good percentage of the fan base that is.
Yes, that's the hope, right?
Sure.
The Titans want Will Levis to be the future of the franchise for obvious reasons. Amy Adams-Strunk's statement initially when they fired Mike Vrabel, the last two lines of the statement, last year we added a promising young quarterback and several other talented players to our roster. With the coaching search, enviable cap space, and a top 10 draft position, this offseason is as important as any in our history. I'm excited for the weeks and months ahead. We will meet the moment. Yes, the hope for everybody in Tennessee and Titans fans worldwide and in that building is that Levis is the franchise quarterback. But I think that there are also a lot of people that say if Levis does not meet that requirement of getting that second contract, and if we don't know in 2 years whether or not he's the guy, or we know that he's not, then the future of the Callahan era won't be very bright. And I think I would agree with that. Look what just happened with Arthur Smith.
Oh.
With Desmond Ridder, right? Like, nobody knew if Desmond Ridder was going to be the future, but that's where Arthur put his chips in. It didn't work.
And then took the chips back and then put them back in.
And he's out in 2 years.
Yeah.
So much matters. 3 years, excuse me. So I would be hesitant to say that the Titans and Amy Adams Strunk will have the patience to, okay, if Levis doesn't work out 2 to 3 years from now and the offense is struggling, then Callahan being the one to go get his guy at quarterback. I don't know. I don't know that we could sit here and say that.
Well, those conversations are very, very early. All I'm saying is, like, I don't think there's enough from Levis to move the needle one way or the other. I'm saying that Will Levis being here means that there is a quarterback that Brian Callahan can work with. I don't think that that's anything definitive about what Will Levis and the future of the Tennessee Titans is. I understand what you're saying.
I am saying they are going to succeed or fail with Will Levis moving forward.
Well, sure. That's the guy. That's who they've got.
That's what I'm saying. Like, I feel like you are hesitant to label him. Calling him the future of the franchise doesn't mean he's going to be an all-pro and an MVP candidate.
I don't like looking ahead on these things.
I'm just saying he is the present and the future. How that works out, we have no idea. But that is the case, right? Like, can we say that? Will Levis is the present and the future of the Titans, at least for the next 3 or so years. That's what they want. That's what they want it to be. We just don't know how it's going to turn out.
He's the present. He's for sure the present. And they'll bring in somebody to compete with Malik and, theoretically compete with Levis. They'll bring in a quarterback that Callahan, feels like can operate the system to an extent. But, I don't know what Jake Browning's status is or somebody like that. But somebody that they're comfortable with and also that Levis can learn from. Beyond just Malik. There will be competition through training camp. They'll make a decision on who the quarterbacks are moving forward. It's safe to assume that Will Levis is in the driver's seat. He's the present. 615-737-1045 is how you join. Robert is in Nashville next.
Hey, Buck, how are you, buddy?
Good.
Hey, I know who Brian Callahan's going to be. It's going to be me. It's my unpredictability. It's my Madden prowess. I will go quadruple reverse with a Hail Mary on 4th down. That's really what's going to guide the Titans to a championship. Me.
Okay.
Have a good one.
I appreciate the call. Well, wait, don't leave. I have questions. I have follow-ups. What are your thoughts, future offensive coordinator of the Tennessee Titans, on franchise quarterback potentially? Maybe, ? Will Levis? Somebody in the chat says, get this man a contract ASAP. I agree. Confidence. Sell it to me, baby. Callahan's quarterback resume, we've been through it, right? We've talked about Stafford. We talked about Carr, Burrow, obviously. Browning. Lucas brought up Tebow and the work that Callahan did on that Denver coaching staff. Not as the offensive coordinator, not as the play caller, not as the quarterback's coach, but still somebody who was able to find a package of plays to help Tim Tebow be a successful quarterback for a period of time for Denver.
Small period of time.
Small period of time.
But a period of time.
And then a tight end. Jaguars legend. The resume is what makes you hopeful. But again, and I think I opened the show this way, it's not just about Levis. It's about hedging your bets against, okay, Levis got hurt. Let's see what the other guy got. Can you put the biggest selling point? One of the questions that I would love to know if they asked him in these meetings is, okay, say Levis gets hurt. What are you doing with Malik? Is there something there? Do you have an idea how to put together a game plan based on that quarterback skill sets? Have you watched him as well? He's under contract for the foreseeable future. It's not a totally cut and dry, obvious answer as to what they're going to do with him moving forward. But okay, you've done this with backup quarterbacks in Cincinnati. Do you think you could do this here? Is there something there? Do we need to explore other options? What's your plan behind Will Levis? Those things matter too. Goody is in Rochester next.
What's up, Buck? Hello.
Hey.
So I'm going to agree with Lucas and say, hey, we need an offensive line coach just because he's the headliner of the show and you don't really matter.
Mm.
The other thing is, for a guy who screams offense, 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 that you want more points, and you want a defensive coordinator more than an offensive line coach that's going to score you points is ridiculous.
Thank you for the call.
So he's referencing our conversation, an hour ago?
Yes.
That you prioritize nailing the DC hire over the offensive line coach hire, and I think differently.
Yes. Got to have balance. You'll get an opportunity to replace a defensive coordinator or get a stopgap defensive coordinator or have a defensive coordinator that matters but maybe not is the most important thing. The offensive line coach, of course, here is a priority. But if you've got a head coach that's so offensively skewed, you need somebody to be able to manage the other side of the ball because the Titans have issues there too. 615-737-1045. Last call for phone calls if you got them. We'll get to those, update the polls, wrap it up here on 1045 The Zone. Last call for phone calls. Don't worry if you don't get in with us. You got Blaine and Mickey. You got 3HL. They're right after. We're just the opening act. 615-737-1045, how you jump in. We'll get you updated on some other interesting dominoes that may fall now that the Titans have made their head coaching hire. Expect an announcement in the next day or so. John is in Nashville up next. Hey, John.
Hey, how you guys doing?
Good.
Outside of the box on OC, how about Mark Brunell? He's the quarterback coach with the Lions right now, worked with Ben Johnson for 2 years. Jared Goff has said great things about him and how he's kind of helped Goff resurrect his career.
Well, thank you for the call. There's going to be a lot of names that people toss out. I'm fascinated to see how many are outside, how many he brings with him from previous stops, whether that's Cincinnati, Los Angeles, whether there are any candidates that are retained. Charles London is an interesting figure in all this, the quarterback's coach and passing game coordinator, because he was interviewing for OC jobs last year and ultimately landed here in Tennessee, kind of a later add to the coaching staff, a little before Chris Harris ultimately decided that he was going to take the cornerbacks coach job. But how Charles London, how members of Mike Vrabel's staff who are still under contract factor into all of this at all is something that I'm going to be interested to see how that plays out in the coming days. We had some reporting from On3, a college outlet that is reporting on a college coach in a potential professional landing spot. Lucas, what's the latest from On3 Sports and Jim Harbaugh?
That Jim Harbaugh and the Los Angeles Chargers are, quote, within striking distance of a deal for Harbaugh to be the next head coach. So nothing official, not reporting that he will with certainty be the next head coach. Not even that they are finalizing a deal, but that they are within
striking distance.
Striking distance. They have crossed half court.
Well, that's the nice thing. That is the nice thing about all of this is you don't have to scramble now, because it is an arms race to get these dudes, and it's not just about landing the head coach that you want. It's about finding the most viable coordinator options as well. You've got to get out there as soon as humanly possible. It gives the Titans and Callahan a huge advantage where everybody else is still, quote unquote, within striking distance. You got Atlanta flying up to Detroit to interview Ben Johnson. You told me earlier.
Yes.
You've still got the Seahawks job out there kind of floating nebulously. Will it be Mike Vrabel? Will it be somebody else? Who's to say? Does Pete Carroll factor into this coaching cycle situation at all, given that it feels like he got forced out? I mean, it doesn't feel like it. It sounds like he got forced out.
It doesn't seem like he factors in.
Anywhere around, not really.
Have you seen his name pop up once for any opening?
I saw a Pro Football Talk article about him and the Chargers potentially, but that's also, it's like saying Mike Vrabel's interviewed for the job, so technically he's in the mix. Jim Harbaugh seems like he's going to be the Chargers guy, but we'll see.
And then if Harbaugh is the Chargers guy, open season on Michigan's roster. The way it's been for Alabama.
Yeah, but not the way that it's been at Alabama.
Not as
we
enticing,
talked about
no.
this.
Right, the talent profile is not nearly as high.
This is totally different.
Yeah, Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards and J.J. McCarthy, those guys are all gone to the draft. But it would be interesting to see Michigan's corresponding move if that was the case, if they just promoted Sharon Moore, who coached damn near as many games as Harbaugh did this year.
That's true.
On the sideline. I mean, he beat Ohio State. Sharon Moore was the head coach when they beat Ohio State.
I hope he gets some kind of financial compensation for that. Like, I got to take some money out of Harbaugh's paycheck if Harbaugh hadn't done it already.
I know, right? Literally coached half the regular season.
I mean, come on. He missed 4 games?
Well, he had 2 separate suspensions.
That's right.
One at the beginning of the season and then another when all the sign-stealing stuff came down.
Emmett Jones says, why on earth would Brian Callahan want anybody from Vrabel's staff? Well, listen, the core of your team is the thing that was rotten, all right? The roster is the thing that was rotten. The coaching staff is not. It's not. These are coaches who other people wanted as recently as last offseason. There was wholesale changes across the board with guys in different spots, moving people around to different analyst roles from position coaches, putting passing game coordinators, run game analysts in. Like this is a pretty extensive and thorough staff that was put together. A lot of external candidates, by the way, that were brought in for the Vrabel only hires the old boys crowd, right? This was not that. In Justin Outen and Charles London, Chris Harris, other guys who aren't necessarily jumping to the top of my mind right now, but these are viable coaches for a variety of different things. I think it's well within Brian Callahan's rights to want to kind of comb through it before they're completely released from their contracts and trying to decide if they can't improve upon what they have. Continuity matters here. Aaron is calling us from Hawaii. Hey, Aaron.
Hey, I just wanted to say, like, if Vrabel doesn't get hired during this coaching cycle with all the openings that are out there, and the media is putting him out there as, like, this great head coach, what does that really say about Vrabel and his coaching style if it's not wanted?
It's going to be an interesting question.
We will all have been wrong if that's the case.
Yes. I think it's more likely he ends up coaching somewhere in 2024 than missing the cycle or taking a year off, however you want to position it. The Seahawks job sounds like it's the most viable. I saw Peter King call it one of the best potential marriages that was out there with John Schneider and Mike Vrabel, but we'll see. They have to make decisions here soon. Teams are going to move. Just as that I told you yesterday, the Titans were going to move quickly on this. Everybody else, this is just going to exacerbate that. So you'll see the rest of them start to come into line either this evening or at latest tomorrow.
Still 5 openings.
Polls, please.
I'm going to make you an offer you can't refuse. Because the polls have closed and the votes have been tallied. It's time for a poll update. And he's a good boy. Buck Rising show producer and correspondent, Lucas Panzica.
Presented by Two Rivers Ford, who sells below MSRP on any non-specialty new Ford. What was your initial reaction when you saw the Adam Schefter report that the Titans are nearing a deal with Brian Callahan as the next head coach? Brett says we can finally have a franchise that is embracing modern NFL ideas.
Points. That's what came to my mind. More points, please.
Marty,
all of the points.
Marty says excited to see what a passing-minded coach could do with this football team. And Brother Paul says just happy his name is not Mike.
You had options. There was a couple of Mikes out there. Mike McDonald looked pretty good. No more Mikes.
Mike Kafka, Mike McDonald. Who else? Any other Mikes out there on the carousel?
Not jumping off the top of my head.
Which Titans player other than Will Levis could benefit most from Brian Callahan's hiring? Brian says Malik Willis, with the coach with some history of helping quarterbacks improve. Could Willis take a bigger step towards at least being a competent backup? Dean says all the returning wide receivers. Jesse agrees. He says Burks and Phillips if they can stay healthy.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Traylon Burks and Kyle Phillips might be good football players. They're not out there.
Eric says Tajay Spears.
Oh, well. Ooh, I like that comparison, though, for Tajay. That him within this system, I think, is going to be the ideal fit. Do you think this means that Derrick Henry's not coming back?
I felt like Mike Vrabel's firing felt like the nail in the coffin in that regard. I mean, what about Henry Fitz? You know what?
I mean, they couldn't figure out Derrick last year.
Right.
And that was supposed to be the offensive innovation. Right?
I mean, ask yourself this. Would Derrick Henry be a good fit in the Cincinnati Bengals offense?
No. Not necessarily. I mean, I don't know. If you have Derrick Henry on the roster, then you tailor things to make it work. But he's not on the roster. Well, he's technically on the roster until March. When these contracts expire, but still, I don't think so. We'll see.
What is your biggest concern with the hire of Brian Callahan? Billie Jean season on Twitter says that we don't get to see Stonehouse 6 times a game. Phil says his biggest concern is how am I going to afford Super Bowl tickets every year? Anthony's biggest concern is that he does not address the offensive line issues. For Karen, it is experience. For Justin, it is that he never called plays. For Daniel, it's that the last OC recommended by Peyton was Adam Gase.
Well, for me, it's that his roster still sucks. So he's hired. Good luck. God bless. Happy draft season.
And what is the most important hire that Brian Callahan has to make? Brian says, number 1, O-line coach. Number 2, defensive coordinator. Kenneth says O-line coach. Gary says defensive coordinator. Jack says strength and conditioning coach.
They have yet to hire one of those, and they'll need a new one. That I can assure you with the Titans is not going to be retained. You know what? Something just on the way out the door, whenever we talk to Rand, which I assume will be at this introductory press conference with Callahan.
Which we assume will be tomorrow?
Well, it's not going to be today. I want to know what they plan to do about the strength and conditioning stuff moving forward. I don't think he's going to answer questions about what they've done in the past, now that it's a little bit of a new thing. But I think for those of you who want questions about that specific part of it and how they're going to rectify that for the Titans, because that's a big part of it too, I'd be curious to hear what his answer to that question is. Anyway, that's all the time that we have. Prime time tonight. Blaine and Mickey next. They got you. Have a great afternoon.